everyone, I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle, along with Juan Williams, Jesse Waters, Dana Perino, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. There's been years and years of talk by presidents about making our children safe again in their classrooms. This president is determined to finally get it done.
People sitting in my position did not take action. They didn't take proper action. They took no action at all. We're going to take action. We're going to do strong background checks. We're going to work on getting the age up to 21 instead of 18. We're getting rid of the bump stocks, and we're going to be focusing very strongly on mental health.
Mr. Trump held another sit-down on the subject at the White House today, this time with state and local officials from across the country. In addition to gun law reforms and mental health screenings, the president suggests arming some teachers to deter school shootings.
We have to harden our schools, not soften them up. A gun-free zone to a killer or somebody that wants to be a killer, that's like going in for the ice cream. That's like, here I am, take me. One of the fake news networks, CNN last night, was saying, I want teachers to have guns. I don't want teachers to have guns. I want certain highly adept people that understand weaponry, guns, if they really have that aptitude. I think a concealed permit for having teachers and letting people know that there are people in the building with guns. You won't have, in my opinion, you won't have these shootings because these people are cowards. They're not going to walk into a school if 20% of the teachers have guns.
Not everyone is on board with that idea. So a lot of progress in terms of the last 2 days, getting people together, Greg, to talk about these issues, brainstorming, coming up with some ideas. The president now has some specifics that he seems to be seizing upon.
It's interesting that most of the practical solutions are coming from reasonable people that know statistics, understand the weaponry, and can speak rationally. I have to say that we've gone through this a lot of these shootings in the last, especially with the five over the last 6 years. We have mentioned specifically these very solutions. We've talked about hardening soft targets. I remember every time there was a shooting, I would say the same thing about Fox News we're surrounded by security, and the people that talk about gun control on TV are surrounded by security. When you're on CNN or MSNBC or wherever, there are people who create a loop of fabulous armed security so they can go tell you why you shouldn't have a gun. We've talked about databases. We've talked about asylums a number of times. I guess my point is, it amazes me how narrow the media is on this topic, that they act as if they've never heard these things before, that these are all like mind-blowing. Oh my God, you mean have armed security in schools? Well, you're criminalizing the schools. It's like, no, it's like these are not new ideas. But these are ideas that we have talked about, and it drives me crazy. It just shows when anchors and people get the vapors over this stuff, it shows how blind they have been to this discussion and how they've cordoned themselves off from people with actual sensible ideas. Instead of saying do something and then getting angry and emotional, these are actually practical solutions, but we have talked about these for years.
Okay, Dana, what do you make of the last 48 hours in terms of the discussions, the people that came to speak, groups brought together, and the ideas?
Well, I think it's all been super interesting. And I was thinking about today, let's talk about the presidents, because I think the CNN town hall is just something different, and it was a different tone and tenor.
A little bit later, yeah.
So one of the things that you do at a White House, I think they still have it there, it's called the policy time with the president. This is usually something that is definitely not on camera, and it's where everybody that has a seat at the table, usually senior staff and relevant federal agencies, either the secretary or the deputy, are there, and they throw out their ideas, and the president can say yes, no, I don't like. You were actually watching that in real time today. For example, a couple of times the president jumped in and said, I don't like the active shooter drills. I don't like it. And he explained why. Because he said for children, it would be traumatic. And why would we want to do this to them? It was very interesting to see that. And you also have a situation where a president in real time is talking about ideas that aren't totally fleshed out. And so when somebody says, well, but the NRA is not going to support that, it's like, oh, yeah, they will. Then the NRA says, well, no, actually, I don't support that when it comes to raising the age limit. But he's not afraid to walk over hot coals that most politicians aren't willing to do, to just say, well, I'll try that. I'm for that. Well, why don't we try that? And maybe at the end of this, we'll end up with the bump stock thing, maybe something on the state level that deals with protecting schools and hard targets. I do think that some of that has to come from a local level. You get people getting real specific real quickly. The president said, what about giving some of these teachers bonuses? If they are adept at using weapons and they could be one of these teachers, and we could give them a little bit of bonus, and it's an incentive money. Immediately, the school board person there says, yeah, could you tell us how we might actually pay for that? Because we don't have any extra money for that. And the president's like, okay, but we'll work on that later. You're actually watching policymaking in real time rather than getting it all finished and in a nice package with a bow and then presented to the American people. So it's interesting.
Okay, good.
I love the bonus idea, though. That was a great idea.
It's a businessman's idea.
Exactly.
It's an incentive that would work.
But it makes sense, right?
Not crumbs.
You build
Not
in
crumbs,
some
yeah.
incentives. What did you think, Jesse? I mean, obviously, I know you were very moved, as we all were yesterday. And then today was, I think, a significant follow-up.
I'm kind of struck by how the Republican Party is the party of ideas. To Greg's point, you've had so many specific ideas come out from the president's mouth about solving this issue. You've had a lot of specific ideas coming from the president's mouth about solving immigration. And we saw the same kind of organic, how the sausage is made kind of meeting with the immigration thing. You're seeing it with guns now. And I'm not hearing the same sort of ideas coming from the Democratic side of the aisle. I don't even know what the Democrats want to do on guns. I know they don't like guns. I know they want to ban AR-15s, but besides that, in terms of school safety, what is the Democrats' position on school safety? I don't know what it is. Maybe Juan can enlighten me, but we've just rattled off 3 to 4 to 5, 6 really great practical ideas, and the president, to his credit, is leading his party away from the kind of strict, I'm not going to do anything on guns stance that they've had in the past. And it's a tired analogy. It's the Nixon goes to China analogy. I hate to use it, but it's so appropriate here. If anybody can do something on guns and gun safety, it's going to be President Donald J. Trump. It's not like, and the Democrats love to say this, the kindergarten teacher who's 80 years old, Miss Edelman, is going to be packing a 9mm on her waist while she teaches, 1 + 1 is 2. That's a scare tactic. He's talking about janitors or bureaucrats or administrators or teachers that are trained and have licenses, have a locked up weapon, so when the alarm goes off, they can go do that. I don't see what the problem is with that. The Democrats seem to want to ban bad guys and good guys from having weapons. I don't understand why we would ban good guys.
Okay. All right, Juan, what did you think of the last 2 days now?
Well, I think the signal event of the last 2 days is the young people coming out, Kimberly, in the way that they have and becoming a force in the political discussion about guns in the aftermath of what took place in Parkland. And then the other side of it that's more fascinating to me, in a sad way, is the attacks on the kids that have come from the right, calling them actors and puppets.
Crisis actors.
Yeah, and absolutely belittling young people because they stand up and say, hey, this is impacting our lives. Enough's enough. Do something. I think it is a cry that's being heard around the country. Now, to me, when you talk about things like, oh, let's arm the schools, which is, seems to me, the #1 idea coming from President Trump, essentially, I think you're enlisting then in the NRA Army because you're saying everybody has to have guns. We're going to have guns everywhere, even around our children. And I think with the proliferation of guns in schools, I think you can anticipate there are going to be more gun incidents in schools. And to me, that's not a good idea. I think what we want to do is speak clearly. The problem is because of the NRA and its power over the politicians, you get into a situation like you had last night at the CNN event where Marco Rubio, he's saying, I am for lowering the age limit, which is what President Trump has said with regard to the guns.
Yeah, we're going to talk about
and people say, oh, no, what about
Yeah, but your fixation on the NRA is your way out of a debate.
No,
we sat here and just mentioned practical things. And
there's no practical.
But the NRA. Let's focus on what we talked about.
Greg, I said I think that arming schools is essentially asking all of us to enlist in the NRA Army so we don't have to have a discussion
well, speaking
about
of the NRA,
gun control.
if we can, Leader Wayne LaPierre offered a fierce defense of gun rights at CPAC.
If they truly cared, what they would do is they would protect them. For them, it's not a safety issue. It's a political issue. Their goal is to eliminate the Second Amendment and our firearms freedoms so they can eradicate all individual freedoms. Evil must be confronted immediately with all necessary force to protect our kids. To stop a bad guy with a gun, it takes a good guy with a gun.
Okay, that was a line, Greg, that was well received by the crowd. Saying,
Yeah, it's a
put down evil. You need
worn
somebody.
line. We've heard this line before, but it's true. If you want an example of what he's talking about, just listen to the police chief last night, and I know we're going to talk about the CNN town hall in the B block. But government, the police, sometimes that police chief can't protect you. I mean, they went to that kid's house how many times? They had like how many, 30 some odd instances, and they booed the NRA at that town hall. So what I learned when I listened to that police chief is that a private citizen, which is a security or trained personnel, could have stopped this because the police didn't. And that's the thing. It's like sometimes government just can't be there. And I go back to that other statistic that's been used. The duration of a gun attack is dictated by the arrival of a second gun. So if the gun's already there, do the math.
Let me just tell you
lives.
something that stood out to me watching Wayne LaPierre, who I know. I thought Wayne LaPierre at CPAC, this is going to be Wayne LaPierre being feted, endorsed, applauded. Dana Loesch was there too,
Yeah.
Kimberly. I thought this is going to be their moment because this is their crowd. At one point, Wayne LaPierre says, it's awfully quiet. Oh, I guess you should be afraid. You know why? I think there are lots of people who identify as conservatives and gun rights supporters who are uncomfortable at this moment, and I think that's great.
I think you're looking at a transition at the NRA. I think that he is the old face of the NRA, and I think the new face is Dana Lash.
Don't tell him that. He would not be happy.
But I'm just thinking that Dana Lash is I believe, is the future, which you have a young, strong woman who can articulate this idea to young people and brave enough to go in front. Like, CNN offered such a great deal to Dana Lash. Don't come and we'll make fun of you, or come and we'll make fun of you.
Well,
Yeah,
Marco Rubio showed up.
I agree.
We got to talk, guys. That's the B block. We've said it 10 times.
I want to address something you said in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You said we were going to arm the schools. That's not accurate. Not every teacher gets a gun. They're not going to have, like, turrets, above the school with, like, machine guns sweeping the grounds. That's insane. And you're saying you're enlisting them in the NRA Army? That's just rhetoric, Juan. If you give one teacher, a trained teacher, a weapon to then use to neutralize a school shooter before police can get there, that's practical, that's safe.
Yeah.
You feel safer being protected by weapons when you're at a football game, you're at a Ravens game. There's one police officer armed for each 1,000 fans. That's a good ratio. So if you have a high school with 1,000 people, you have one armed person. That's not an army from the NRA. And the NRA is being created to be a boogeyman because if you look at the statistics, the NRA doesn't donate that much money to politicians compared to other people. They donate less than unions.
Wow.
They donate less than Planned
Holy
Parenthood.
smokes.
They don't even crack the top 50 in terms of lobbying outfits. So, listen, I know the NRA is powerful in your mind, but a lot of the politicians that vote with the NRA aren't doing it because they're beholden, because they're getting a lot of donations. You can't buy a politician for $2,500. They vote with the Second Amendment because they believe in the Second Amendment.
All right, I want to get Dana in.
Well, I'm just going to bring up one other thing, which is the possible things that are changing. One of them has to do with something that's been sort of a thorn in the side of a lot of people for a long time, especially on the left, is that the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, because of an amendment that was passed 25 years ago, has not been allowed and has not been funded to study gun violence and mental illness and gun violence. And all of those things get botched up. So one of the things we've talked about here is that it's better to make decisions based on evidence and facts and research so that you can be logical about it and actually try to solve the right problem. Well, there's been changes now. It looks like at least the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the new one, Alex Azar, looks like he's willing, he said in a hearing last week, to look at this issue, put some money towards it, and even the person, it's called the Dickey Amendment, former Congressman Dickey is actually thinking, I didn't mean for this to actually happen over 25 years. I'm okay with having some research done. So it might be a small thing, but if you are wanting to make decisions based on research, then there might be a way forward.
But Dana, do you know why that is? It's because of the power of the dollars from the NRA that has shut that down and made it a political issue.
No,
now
I know. I used to answer questions about it all the time. But
it's obviously not that powerful because they're now open to doing it.
Well, I mean, 25 years. That's how difficult it is. Greg says, let's have real ideas and real conversations. I am so for it, but I think exactly the opposite of you. I think it's shut down by people who are fearful of the NRA.
But what about,
what have you been doing the last 2 days?
President I remember somebody named President Obama who had a Democratic Senate and Democratic Congress.
They had a 65-45 majority in the Senate. They voted on the assault weapons ban. 16 Democrats voted against it.
Right.
9 are still in the Senate.
And I'm just saying, people are fearful of having an honest discussion.
But that's also Democrats.
You say people when it's Democrats.
No. I think the Republicans are totally in lock to the NRA, and some Democrats are fearful that if they say anything, they'll suffer at the ballot box.
I think you guys create this in your head so you don't have to actually give practical solutions that allow law-abiding gun owners to have their guns. So you create this big, like, we can't do anything, we're paralyzed. So you can't actually listen to the practical solutions that have been laid before you.
Okay, well, more to come on the gun debate when the 5 returns.
Sorry about that.
You got to take the shot.